When stars come out and skies turn deep, it's time for hearts to softly keep the love of God, both big and small, to share with others, one and all. Be kind to friends, both near and far. God sees your heart just where you are. A smile, a hurt, a hug, a gentle word can spread His love through all the world. Your God loves hearts that shine, not stun. Show tenderness, that's all, not stun. The quiet ones who help, not stun. Show tenderness that shine, not there. When someone stumbles, who help with care.
Paul's Shipwreck.
Paul, a dedicated missionary, found himself amidst a perilous journey across the vast sea. He was on his way to Rome, not as a free man, but as a prisoner, bound by chains yet free in spirit. A young man named Timothy, his faithful companion, sailed with him, sharing in his trials and tribulations. The journey began under fair skies, but soon ominous clouds gathered on the horizon. The winds grew fierce, and the calm waters transformed into a raging tempest. The ship, once stout and strong, now creaked and groaned under the relentless assault of the waves. "We must throw the cargo overboard," shouted the centurion, his voice barely audible above the storm's roar. "Lighten the load, or we shall surely sink." Paul, despite his imprisonment, offered counsel. "This voyage will be disastrous, and bring great loss to ship and cargo, and to our own lives also." But his warning was unheeded by the captain and owner, who trusted in their own judgment and the ship's strength. Days turned into a harrowing blur of wind and rain. The sun and stars remained hidden, and all hope of survival began to fade. The passengers, including the soldiers and sailors, despaired, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, Paul stood firm, a beacon of unwavering faith. He gathered the frightened travelers around him, his voice calm and resolute, despite the storm's fury. "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss," Paul declared, not with accusation, but with a somber truth. "But now I urge you to take courage, because not one of you will lose his life. Only the ship will be destroyed." Timothy, huddled close to Paul, listened intently, finding strength in his mentor's words. He had seen Paul face countless dangers, and his faith had always carried them through. Paul continued, "Last night an angel of the God to whom I belong, and whom I serve, stood beside me, and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you.'" A hush fell over the weary travelers, their fear momentarily replaced by a glimmer of hope. Paul's words, spoken with such conviction, resonated deeply, offering a promise of deliverance in their darkest hour. "So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as He told me," Paul affirmed, his gaze sweeping across their anxious faces. "Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island." For 14 nights and days, they were tossed about in the Adriatic Sea. On the 14th night, as they were still being driven across the sea, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings, and found that the water was 20 fathoms deep. A little later they took soundings again, and found it was 15 fathoms deep. Fearing they would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern, and prayed for daylight. As daylight approached, the sailors attempted to escape the ship, lowering a lifeboat into the sea. Paul, ever vigilant, noticed their deceitful intentions. "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved," Paul warned the centurion and the soldiers. The soldiers, trusting Paul's judgment, cut the ropes of the lifeboat and let it drift away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive." He took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. Encouraged by his example, they all ate some food. In total, there were 276 of them on board. After they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship further by throwing the grain into the sea. When day came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, which they decided to make for if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea. At the same time, they untied the ropes that held the rudders in place, hoisted the foresail to the wind, and headed for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion, wanting to spare Paul's life, ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to follow, some on planks and others on pieces of the ship. And so it was that everyone reached land safely, just as Paul had promised. They found themselves on an island called Malta, where the local people showed them unusual kindness. Paul, always ready to serve, gathered a pile of brushwood and put it on the fire. As he did, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. The islanders, seeing the snake, exclaimed, "Surely this man is a murderer, for though he escaped the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul, with a calm flick, shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. This astonished the people, who then changed their minds and said he was a god. Paul used this opportunity not to glorify himself, but to minister to the people of Malta, healing many. The chief official of the island, a man named Publius, welcomed them and entertained them hospitably for 3 days. Publius's father was sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul went in to see him. After Paul prayed and placed his hands on him, the father was healed. News of this miracle spread quickly, and soon the other sick people on the island came and were cured. For 3 months, Paul and Timothy stayed on Malta, sharing their faith and helping the islanders. They were honored in many ways, and, when they sailed again, the people provided them with everything they needed for their journey. The shipwreck, a moment of profound crisis, had become an unexpected opportunity for Paul to demonstrate unwavering faith, courage, and selfless service. He had not only saved lives but had also spread hope and healing. Timothy, witnessing Paul's steadfastness through the storm and his compassionate service on Malta, learned invaluable lessons about faith in adversity and the power of God's providence. The moral of Paul's shipwreck is that even in the most desperate and dangerous circumstances, faith, courage, and selfless service can turn adversity into an opportunity for greater good and divine purpose.
When stars come